We're here tonight because you've become a burden to your own family. My mother said that into a microphone. On my 52nd birthday, there were 35 people sitting in folding chairs in my parents' living room, arranged in neat rows, facing a single empty seat. Mine. A banner hung behind her in blue marker. We love you enough to be honest. My younger brother stood in the corner with his phone mounted on a tripod. The red light was on, streaming live. My father held a thick envelope in his hands, 3 pages at least, maybe 4. I could see the tremble in his fingers, though his voice was steady when he spoke. We've made a list, he said, of patterns, of behaviors, of the ways you've hurt this family for decades. Decades. 35 witnesses, my church community, 2 former business partners, neighbors I'd known for 30 years, and my birthday cake, nowhere in sight. I didn't shout. I didn't walk out. I didn't defend myself. I sat down in that chair like a defendant in a courtroom that had already decided the verdict. Because what none of them knew, what not one person in that room knew, was that I had spent the last 8 weeks preparing for this night. And when my brother leaned closer to his camera and said, "This is going to be good," I reached into my jacket pocket and quietly said 6 words that changed everything. Before you continue, I've prepared something too. What happened in the next 11 minutes ended 6 relationships. 1 marriage collapsed before dessert. A business partnership died before the live stream cut. And someone in that room lost far more than their reputation. But the most shocking part, the one detail that nobody saw coming, didn't surface until the very end of the night. And even now, most people still don't know it. If you've ever been the one who pays the bills, keeps the peace, and gets called selfish for setting limits, this story may hit closer than you expect. If you're busy, subscribe now so you can come back and finish this later. Stories like this aren't about drama. They're about truth and consequences. Let me ask you something. If your own family put you on trial in front of your community, would you defend yourself, or would you let them finish and then press play? Because that's exactly what I did. And I promise you, the ending isn't what you think. For 12 years, I paid for everything. Not because anyone forced me, not because I was asked directly, but because that's what responsible sons do. At least, that's what I was taught. When my father's hardware store began struggling after the recession, I stepped in quietly. $1,100 a month toward the mortgage. No contract, no announcement, just an automatic transfer on the 1st of every month. When my mother's medical insurance premiums went up, I covered the difference. When the air conditioning unit failed one July, I wired the money the same afternoon. My younger brother Caleb had what my mother liked to call entrepreneurial spirit. 3 businesses in 10 years, landscaping, online supplements, a food truck that lasted 8 months. Each time one collapsed, he'd sit at Sunday dinner explaining how investors didn't understand his vision. Each time I wrote a check, not once did I bring it up. Sunday dinners were tradition. 4 o'clock sharp, my mother in the kitchen, my father pretending to watch football, Caleb arriving late dramatic, carrying a bottle of wine like it was a trophy. I was always early. I set the table, took out the trash, fixed the leaky faucet, changed the smoke detector batteries, and somehow I was the distant one. "You're so serious all the time," my mother would say. "You don't know how to relax." Caleb would laugh. "Big brother thinks he's the Bank of America." Everyone would chuckle. I would smile, and on the 1st of every month, the money still went through. What bothered me wasn't the money. I could afford it. I've worked in logistics management for 27 years. I've planned supply chains across 3 states. I know how to manage risk. What I didn't know was that I had become the risk. About 8 months ago, small things began to shift. My mother showed up to dinner with a new leather handbag. Designer. Not extravagant, but not modest either. Caleb traded in his truck for a newer model. Said it was a smart investment. My father mentioned bowling nights again. Bowling. For 22 years, he's bowled every Tuesday. Same league, same men. Only one problem. The bowling alley closed 3 years ago. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't accuse. But I started watching more carefully, listening more carefully. At dinner one Sunday, Caleb was in the garage with Dad. The door was half open. I stepped outside to take a call and heard my name. "He won't stop," Caleb said. My father's voice was low. "He's too responsible." My mother's voice floated in from inside the kitchen. "Exactly. He'd never walk away. He needs to feel needed." I stood there longer than I should have. Needed. That word landed wrong. Not appreciated. Not respected. Needed. As if I were a tool. A utility. Something plugged into the wall. I walked back inside before they saw me. Sat down at the table, passed the mashed potatoes, smiled at my mother, and that night, for the first time in 12 years, I opened my banking app and looked at the total I'd transferred to my family. $298,000. I stared at the number for a long time. Not angry. Not yet. Just curious. Because something didn't add up. The mortgage balance should have been lower by now. The struggling hardware store still managed a remodel last spring. Caleb's failed businesses never seemed to affect his lifestyle for very long. And my mother always seemed remarkably calm about bills for someone who claimed they were drowning. 2 weeks later, I stopped by the house on a Wednesday evening. I'd left a folder in the hall closet after helping Dad review some invoices. The front door was unlocked. Voices carried from the kitchen. I almost announced myself. Almost. Then I heard my mother say something that made me freeze in the doorway. "His birthday is perfect," she said. Caleb laughed softly. "He won't see it coming." My father cleared his throat. "Are we sure about this?" "It's the only way," my mother replied. "If we don't confront him now, he'll keep holding money over our heads forever." Holding money over their heads. I stepped back into the shadows of the hallway. My birthday. Confront. The only way. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, something shifted inside me. Not rage. Not betrayal. Clarity. They weren't planning a party. They were building a stage. And I had just realized I wasn't the guest of honor. I was the performance. What I didn't know yet was how far they were willing to go and what they were hiding behind that word, intervention. I didn't confront them that night. I drove home instead, sat in my driveway with the engine off and the dashboard lights dim, replaying my mother's words over and over in my head. His birthday is perfect. There's something about hearing your own family strategize around you that changes the temperature of your blood. I wasn't hurt. Not yet. I was calculating. The following Sunday dinner went on as usual. Roast chicken, overcooked green beans, Caleb 20 minutes late with a loud apology, and a story about a new investor who believed in his latest venture. My mother beamed at him. My father asked no questions. I listened, and for the first time in my life, I recorded. Not dramatically, not with some hidden camera, just my phone, face down in my jacket pocket. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew something wasn't right. And if there was going to be a stage built for my humiliation, I wanted the full script. 3 days later, I got my first answer. I stopped by the house again after work, midweek, around 7. I knocked this time. No answer. I tried the handle. Unlocked. My father's voice drifted in from the den. Soft, almost playful. "Tuesday works, Linda. Diane's got Bible study. Same as always." I stood still. A woman laughed on the other end of the line. Comfortable. Familiar. He lowered his voice. "She still thinks I'm bowling." The air left my lungs slowly. 22 years of Tuesday bowling. 3 years since the alley closed. I didn't step in. I didn't interrupt. I pulled my phone from my pocket and I pressed record. The next discovery came easier than I expected. When you start paying attention, patterns reveal themselves. One Sunday afternoon, Caleb had stepped outside to take a call. He didn't realize the sliding glass door hadn't fully closed. "I can't sign that contract yet," he whispered. "Not until my brother finalizes the next transfer." "Yeah, he thinks it's for the mortgage. He won't check." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. He continued. "No, he has no idea what Mom did with the estate money." Estate money. That phrase lodged into my mind like a splinter. 2 nights later, I found out what he meant. My mother was on speakerphone with my aunt. I moved $14,000 from the estate account before the final statement, she said calmly. "It's safer in my personal savings." "And Gary doesn't know?" my aunt asked. "He doesn't need to," my mother replied. "And Daniel certainly doesn't. He'd start asking questions." Daniel. Me. I stood in the hallway outside her bedroom window, recording $14,000 from my grandmother's estate, the same grandmother who had left clear instructions about transparency, the same grandmother who raised me every Saturday when my parents were too busy. By the end of that week, I had 3 separate recordings saved in a folder on my phone. 1 affair, 1 hidden inheritance transfer, 1 conversation about using my financial support as leverage. And then I heard the 4th, the one that confirmed everything. I arrived early one Sunday, earlier than usual. Voices from the kitchen. My mother's tone was precise, organized, the same tone she used when planning church fundraisers. "We'll seat him front and center," she said. "We'll read the list first. Then, Caleb explains how his control affects us. If he tries to leave, we ask him why he can't handle honesty." Caleb laughed quietly. "And if he threatens to cut us off," my mother didn't hesitate. "Then everyone will see how selfish he really is." Silence followed. Then my father's voice, softer this time. "And if this backfires?" "It won't," she replied. "He won't risk looking heartless in front of witnesses." Witnesses. They weren't planning a conversation. They were planning a verdict. I stood outside in the cool evening air, listening to my own family construct a courtroom around me. And in that moment, something inside me stopped hoping. I wasn't angry. I was finished pretending. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my phone in front of me and played each recording back in full. 4 files, 4 doors, each one capable of altering the room they were preparing for my birthday. I didn't want revenge. I wanted balance. But balance requires truth, and truth requires timing. By the time my birthday approached, I had already made my decision. If they chose privacy, I would give it to them. If they chose spectacle, then I would make sure the spectacle was complete. What none of them realized was that I wasn't walking into that living room alone. I was bringing every word they'd spoken with me, and they were about to hear themselves exactly as they sounded. On the night of my 52nd birthday, I arrived at 6:12 p.m. Not early, not late, neutral. The driveway was already full. Cars lined both sides of the street, more than I'd expected. When I stepped inside, I immediately understood why. The living room had been rearranged. Couch pushed against the wall, coffee table removed, 4 neat rows of folding chairs facing a single open space at the front, a microphone on a stand, and behind it, taped carefully to the wall, in thick blue marker, "We love you enough to be honest." No cake, no music, no gifts, just 35 faces turning toward me in synchronized silence. Some nervous, some curious, a few already convinced. Caleb stood to the right, with his phone mounted on a tripod. The red light was glowing steadily, streaming. I scanned the room slowly. 2 former business partners from the regional distribution network, 3 members of our church board, neighbors who'd watched me grow up, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Witnesses. My mother stepped forward first. She wore her cream blouse, the one reserved for holidays and funerals. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice warm but deliberate. "Tonight isn't a party. It's something more important." She looked directly at me. "Daniel, we love you, but we can't ignore what's been happening in this family anymore." My father unfolded 3 sheets of paper from the envelope in his hand. I recognized my mother's handwriting instantly. Neat, slanted slightly to the right. He cleared his throat. "These are patterns," he said. things we've noticed over the years. Over the years, he began reading. Age 15. Refused to lend your brother money for a school trip. I remembered that trip. Caleb had lost the previous loan I gave him. Age 22. Moved out without discussing it. I was 22. Age 38. Insisted on reviewing our mortgage paperwork. Yes, because I was paying it. The list went on. Small moments reframed as character flaws. Responsibility rebranded as control. Boundaries repainted as cruelty. My mother nodded gently at certain points, as though affirming a diagnosis. Caleb stepped forward after the reading. Big brother always thinks he knows best, he said. He pays the bills and then makes us feel small about it. A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the chairs. I sat perfectly still, hands resting on my knees, breathing slow. I had worked in high-pressure negotiations for years. Supply shortages, union disputes, emergency reroutes in the middle of winter storms. Emotion clouds judgment. Silence reveals it. When they finished, my mother looked at me expectantly. "Well?" she asked softly. "Don't you have anything to say?" I stood. The folding chair scraped lightly against the hardwood floor. "Can we speak privately?" I asked calmly. Just the four of us. The question hung in the air. My father hesitated. My mother didn't. "No," she said firmly. "That's the problem. You shut down honest conversation in private. We need accountability." Accountability. Caleb adjusted his camera slightly, making sure my face was centered. I nodded once. "Then let's make sure everything is accounted for," I replied. Confusion flickered across a few faces. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, and for the first time that evening, the room shifted. "What are you doing?" my mother asked, her voice tightening. I held the phone up calmly. "For the sake of honesty," I said evenly. "I thought it would be appropriate for everyone to hear the full picture." Caleb's expression faltered. My father took a small step forward. "This isn't necessary," he began. "Oh, I think it is," I replied gently. I turned toward the room. "I've listened to everything you've said tonight, and I appreciate the effort, truly. But if we're going to discuss patterns, let's make sure we include all of them." The air felt heavier now. No one laughed. No one moved. Caleb's red live stream light still blinked steadily. I opened the folder, labeled simply insurance. 4 files, 4 decisions, 4 consequences. I selected the first one. My thumb hovered over the screen for just a moment. Not because I was unsure, but because I understood that once I pressed play, there would be no returning to Sunday dinners as we once knew them. I looked at my father, then at my mother, then at the 35 witnesses who believed they were watching a confession. "You wanted honesty," I said quietly. And then I pressed play. The speaker didn't shout. It didn't need to. My father's voice filled the room, clearly, unmistakably. "Tuesday works, Linda. Diane's at Bible study. Same as always." A woman laughed softly on the other end. 22 years, my father continued lighter than I had ever heard him at home. "And she still thinks I'm bowling." The recording stopped. The silence did not. It settled thick and heavy across the room. My mother turned toward him slowly, as if the movement required instruction. "Gary," she whispered. My father didn't answer. He stared at the floor. A chair creaked somewhere in the second row. One of the church board members shifted uncomfortably. My former business partner lowered his gaze. Caleb's red live stream light blinked once more, then went dark. I didn't raise my voice. "That was recording 1, I said calmly. My mother found hers again. "This is private," she snapped. "You had no right." I gently lifted my hand. "You asked for accountability." I tapped the second file. Her own voice filled the room this time. Crisp, organized, certain. "I moved $14,000 from the estate account. It's safer in my personal savings. Daniel doesn't need to know." Aunt Margaret's voice responded faintly through the speakerphone. "And Gary, he wouldn't understand." The recording ended. My father looked up sharply now. $14,000, he demanded. My mother's composure cracked for the first time. "It's not what it sounds like." "It sounds exactly like what it is," I replied quietly. Murmurs spread like wind through dry leaves. One of the church board members stood up without speaking and walked toward the door. No one stopped him. I let 10 full seconds pass before continuing. The third file, Caleb's voice now. Lower, impatient. I can't sign that contract until my brother wires the next transfer. He thinks it's for the mortgage. He won't check. A pause, then him again. He's predictable. He needs to feel responsible. The recording ended with a soft click. Caleb had gone pale. That was taken out of context, he said quickly. You don't understand the full conversation. I understand enough, I replied. One of the former business partners I had invited years ago into a regional project stood slowly. You've been leveraging your brother's transfers as collateral, he asked Caleb. Caleb didn't answer. The man picked up his coat. We'll be reviewing our agreement. And just like that one partnership dissolved, 3 recordings, 3 fractures. But the room was still standing. I looked at my mother, then at Caleb, then at my father. There's one more, I said. I almost didn't play it, not because it was worse, but because it was the clearest. My mother's voice returned weeks earlier in the kitchen. His birthday is perfect. We'll seat him front and center. If he threatens to cut us off, everyone will see how selfish he really is. Caleb laughed softly in the background. He won't risk looking heartless in front of witnesses. The recording ended. No one spoke. The banner behind them, "We love you enough to be honest," felt almost theatrical now. My mother stood alone near the microphone. The script in her hands trembled. My father remained seated, stunned by a truth he hadn't prepared for. Caleb stared at his blank phone screen. I placed my phone back into my jacket pocket. That, I said evenly, is the full pattern. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply turned to the room. For 12 years, I've transferred money into this house on the 1st of every month. Mortgage, insurance, emergency repairs, business loans. I paused. As of midnight tonight, every recurring transfer is canceled. A collective inhale swept the chairs. My mother's head snapped toward me. You can't do that, she said. I can, I replied gently. And I will. You're overreacting. No, I said. I'm responding. Caleb took a step toward me. You'd let Mom and Dad lose the house. I met his eyes. I won't fund a narrative that paints me as the villain while I finance the stage. Silence again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't shock. It was recalculation. My father finally stood. He looked smaller than he had when reading that list. This went too far, he said quietly. I nodded. Yes, I agreed. It did. I turned toward the door. No dramatic exit. No slammed door. Just steady steps. But before I reached it, one more thing happened. Something none of them expected. And it would alter more than just our finances. Before I reached the door that night, someone stood up. It wasn't my father. It wasn't Caleb. It was Martin. Martin has known me for 20 years. We've negotiated freight contracts across 3 states together. He's not dramatic, not impulsive. He speaks when he means it. Daniel, he said evenly, I've worked with you long enough to recognize integrity when I see it. The room turned toward him. He buttoned his jacket slowly. This doesn't change my respect for you, he continued. If anything, it clarifies it. He didn't look at my parents when he said it. He looked at me, and then he walked out. One by one, the room began to empty. Not loudly, not angrily, just quietly. Witnesses leaving a courtroom after the verdict has shifted. My mother called after me once as I stepped onto the porch. Daniel, please. I stopped, turned halfway. She looked smaller now, not defeated, exposed. You embarrassed us, she said. I held her gaze. You built the stage, and then I left. That night, I didn't answer my phone. 14 missed calls, 6 voicemails, 2 long text messages. I let them sit. At midnight, I opened my banking app. Mortgage transfer, canceled. Insurance, supplement, canceled. Business support line, canceled. 3 confirmations, no fireworks, no triumph, just quiet. The next morning, I woke up expecting regret. It didn't come. Instead, there was something unfamiliar. Space. Monday afternoon, my father moved out. Not dramatically, no shouting, no broken dishes. He packed a duffel bag and drove to a friend's house across town. 22 years of Tuesday, bowling unraveled in less than 24 hours. My mother called again. I answered this time. You destroyed this family. she said immediately. I let her finish. When she ran out of breath, I spoke calmly. No, I replied. I removed the version of it that depended on silence. She didn't respond. Caleb called 2 days later. His voice was tight. You cost me a contract, he said. I leaned back in my chair. You leveraged my money to secure it. That's not the point. It is exactly the point. He hung up without another word. By the end of the week, the house was listed quietly through a local agent. No public announcement, no dramatic Facebook posts, just a sign in the yard. 12 years of transfers had kept that property stable. Without them, reality adjusted quickly. But here's the part no one in that room expected. My life didn't collapse. It expanded. I paid off the remaining balance on my own home within 3 months. I increased my retirement contributions for the first time in a decade. I booked a fishing trip I had postponed for 7 years because family needed help. Sunday afternoons became quiet, not empty, just peaceful. And then something unexpected happened. My father called again, 2 weeks after moving out. His voice wasn't defensive this time. It was tired. I should have said something sooner, he admitted. About Tuesday nights, a long pause. Yes, we didn't solve everything in that conversation, but for the first time in years, we spoke without performance, without my mother directing the tone. Caleb hasn't called since. My mother sends occasional messages, short, neutral. Thinking of you, I respond when I choose to, not out of obligation, out of clarity. And here's the truth that took me 52 years to learn. Financial support is not love. Silence is not peace. And responsibility does not require self-erasure. That living room wasn't the end of my family. It was the end of an arrangement where I funded my own criticism, an arrangement where generosity was recast as control, an arrangement where truth was dangerous. What surprised me most wasn't the fallout. It was the relief, because when you remove the illusion, you finally see what remains. And sometimes what remains is smaller, but it's real. 6 relationships shifted that night. Some broke completely. Some fractured. One began again on different terms. But the most important one, the one between me and the man I see in the mirror each morning, that one strengthened. I didn't destroy my family. The truth did what truth always does. It exposed whatever couldn't survive it. And as I stood in my kitchen, weeks later, looking at a bank balance that finally reflected my own life, I realized something simple. The most expensive thing I ever paid for was silence, and I was done financing it. If I step outside the emotion of that night and look at this as someone who has spent decades watching families unravel over money, power, and silence, the pattern is painfully familiar. Interventions are meant to help someone who is spiraling, but sometimes they're used to control the one person who refuses to. What happened in that living room wasn't about love. It was about leverage. When a family depends on one member financially, a quiet shift begins. Support turns into expectation. Expectation turns into entitlement. And entitlement eventually demands obedience. When obedience doesn't come, it gets labeled as selfishness. Here's the truth. Most people over 50 understand deeply. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are clarity. Financial generosity does not obligate emotional submission. And silence maintained, for the sake of keeping the peace, almost always becomes the most expensive habit in the room. The man in this story didn't destroy his family. He disrupted a system that depended on him staying quiet. And disruption feels violent to those benefiting from it. If the story resonated with you, if you've ever felt pressured to finance your own disrespect or to carry a role that was never acknowledged, then you already understand the deeper lesson here. Healthy families survive truth. Unhealthy systems don't. If you appreciate stories that explore real boundaries, real consequences, and the quiet strength it takes to draw a line, consider liking this video and subscribing. Not for drama, but for clarity. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply press play. And finally, let the truth speak.